It was a sweltering Tennessee evening in early August of '92, the kind that makes the air stick to your lungs and slows time to a crawl. In the quiet town of Eads, just a half-hour's drive east of Memphis, the day was winding down, shadows stretching long across horse pastures and gravel drives. But at the Roberts estate, a sprawling farmstead tucked behind whispering trees, and an old iron gate, something wasn't right. Alan Roberts, a seasoned land developer with a crisp shirt and a reputation for shaking hands with millionaires, pulled into his driveway like he had every evening for the last 43 years. His wife's car was there, parked neatly. That was normal. But what wasn't was a male, still resting on the edge of the garage step, like a thought interrupted. He called her name. Nothing. The silence was thick, too thick. Inside, the house was still. No music, no humming, no familiar scent of dinner wafting from the kitchen. But her asthma inhaler was sitting on the counter. That was the first real crack in the picture-perfect frame. She never left without it. Worried, Alan began to search the grounds. Maybe she had stepped out to the garden, collapsed somewhere along the fence line. Maybe, but before he could pick up the phone to call authorities. It rang. The voice on the line wasn't familiar. Male, measured, heavy with a foreign accent, maybe Asian. He said he had her, said her name like he knew her personally. Doe. The message was clear. If Alan wanted to see her alive again, he'd need to pay up $100,000. But the caller hung up before saying where or how. Alan didn't hesitate. He dialed the Shelby County Sheriff's Department. The deputies arrived in short order, boots crunching on gravel, eyes already scanning the perimeter. Before long, the FBI's Memphis field office joined the scene, led by seasoned agents trained for kidnappings, interstate abductions, and the kind of high-stakes cases that didn't allow for second chances. They knew the rules. If the victim crossed state lines, the Bureau had full jurisdiction, and time was the real enemy. Alan gave him the rundown. Breakfast that morning with Doe, like always. At 10, he left to meet a prospective buyer, some guy named Sam Wagner, who had called the day before to arrange a visit to one of Alan's properties. But Wagner never showed. Instead of coming home, Alan spent the day laying sod at another property. When he returned, the world was upside down. Agents found no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no struggle. Those clothes, jewelry, purse, all still in place. No sign she left of her own accord. But the mail, that was key. It was only halfway inside the garage, as if she'd barely made it back before something or someone intercepted her. They widened the search. Over 150 acres of Tennessee farmland, meticulously scanned. Grid patterns. Cadaver dogs. Nothing. The FBI, always 5 steps ahead, wired Alan's phone. Installed trace lines. Every breath on that line was recorded, waiting for that voice to return. And it did. That same evening. The same voice called again. Same clipped accent, same vague menace. He knew the feds were listening. Demanded Alan crush the tape and drop it in the driveway. The Bureau outwitted him. Swapped the tape for a blank. The call was tracked to a nearby payphone. By the time the deputies arrived, the booth was empty, swinging gently in the humid breeze. The next morning, FBI agents canvassed the town, knocking on every door within a 5-mile radius. Neighbors hadn't seen Doe that day. No car, no footsteps, no sound. A few recalled a flicker of tension between husband and wife at church earlier that week, but nothing that screamed foul play. Not yet. As the sun set on day 2, one thing was clear. If Doe Roberts was alive, the clock was ticking. And if she wasn't, someone in this town knew why. Day 3 began with tension you could cut with a straight razor. The search had turned up nothing. Not a single thread of fabric, not a drop of blood, not even a disturbed blade of grass. Just a missing woman, a husband with no answers, and a faceless voice playing puppet master over the telephone. The Bureau had a saying, start close, then go wide. And right now, the closest person to Doe Roberts was the man sleeping under her roof. Alan. On paper, he was clean. A respected land developer. A man with charm, money, and the kind of reputation that made sheriffs nod respectfully. But facts don't bend for reputations. And statistically speaking, when a woman vanishes, it's usually someone she knew who made her disappear. FBI agents sat down with Allen again. They needed details, clear, hard ones. He didn't flinch. He explained the day like a well-worn script. Left the house at 10. Drove out to meet the man, Sam Wagner, a potential investor who never showed. Waited over an hour. Then spent the rest of the afternoon at another property laying down sod, sweating under the Tennessee sun. He had no idea where Doe went. He didn't know the voice on the line. He just wanted his wife back. Still, agents needed more than his word. They asked him to take a polygraph, not to trap him, but to measure his heart, his breath, his blood pressure, all the things a guilty man can't fake under pressure. Allen agreed. Under flickering fluorescent lights and the whir of recording needles, the machine ticked away. The questions came slow, methodical. Did you harm your wife? Do you know where she is? Did you stage the ransom call? Every spike and dip of that pen would paint a picture. When it was over, the results came back, inconclusive. Nothing screamed liar, but nothing cleared him either. The Bureau knew better than to trust a machine too much. Polygraphs didn't make arrests. Evidence did, and evidence was still in short supply. If Allen wasn't lying, then someone was. And the name Sam Wagner sat like a rock in the agent's shoes. They ran him through every federal database, cross-checked with DMV records, IRS entries, credit logs, and hotel registries in 4 surrounding states. Nothing. Sam Wagner was a ghost. Either he never existed, or someone wanted him to disappear more than Doe. That made Allen's story wobble. Why mention a phantom if it only draws suspicion? Still, every lead pointed right back to him. But no smoking gun, no body, just a missing woman, and a narrative that didn't quite fit. The feds expanded their efforts. They checked banking activity. Nothing. No ATM use. No checks cashed. They scoured phone records. No odd calls from Doe. No incoming numbers tied to anyone suspicious. And most damning of all, no ransom drop was ever arranged. What kind of kidnapper asks for money and never comes to collect? It didn't add up. And slowly, the focus shifted from a kidnapping with demands to something much darker, something permanent. Within 3 weeks, the mood in the FBI's Memphis office changed. They no longer treated it as a hostage case. They treated it as a murder investigation. But without a body, they needed proof or a mistake. That's when they came back to the house. This time, they weren't looking for signs of life. They were looking for blood. FBI forensics team swept the home top to bottom. Luminol testing in the bathrooms, trace evidence on the floors, carpets vacuumed and bagged. Even the barn was combed, shovel handles dusted, soil sampled, boots examined. Allen stood by, watching them dismantle the last peaceful corner of his life. But he didn't fight them, didn't protest, didn't ask them to stop. And when they were done, they had nothing. Not a drop, not a fiber, not a speck. Still, suspicion doesn't need evidence to fester. Neighbors started talking. Allen had been seen out dancing. Square dancing, no less, just weeks after Doe vanished. And not alone, with new partners. Smiling, laughing. To them, it didn't look like grief. It looked like relief. To the Bureau, it looked like motive. He had the money, the motive, and now, maybe, the time. His alibi covered only 5 hours that day. Plenty of time to make a body vanish in rural Tennessee. But agents weren't alone in their suspicions. The small town of Eads was starting to whisper. And in a case built on silence, whispers have a way of turning into something louder. Autumn crept into Tennessee with brittle leaves and colder questions. It had been nearly 2 months since Doe Roberts vanished, a ghost in the fields of Eads, and the case had stalled. No body, no money exchange, just empty phone calls and a husband everyone was staring at sideways. But then, a new voice entered the story. His name was Charles Lord, a civil servant, church treasurer, trusted, respected, the kind of man who wore his belt high and his conscience higher. He was also one of the Roberts' closest friends. And now he was ready to help. At least, that's what he said. The strange thing was, the kidnapper suddenly reappeared just as Charles stepped in, This time, the caller didn't ring Alan Roberts. He called Charles directly, said Doe was alive, said she was safe, said Alan knew more than he let on. It was all so perfectly timed, so perfectly suspicious. The FBI, always watching from the edges of the frame, leaned forward, hard. They tapped Charles Lord's phone, with his consent, wire up his mailbox too, tucked a hidden camera into a birdhouse nearby. If the kidnapper tried to contact Charles again, they'd have him. But then came a twist no agent expected. One night, Charles invited the FBI into his living room. He had something to show them. He said he'd found a ransom note in his mailbox. No postage, no envelope, just sitting there, waiting for him in the dark. The note was vague, threatening. It lowered the ransom, but still offered no drop instructions. The kind of note that doesn't really want money, just attention. Worse, Charles admitted, he'd already shown the letter to several neighbors before calling the agents. When the FBI got their hands on it, the evidence was compromised. Too many fingerprints, too many unknowns. Still, they ran the prints. Every single one belonged to Charles, and the people he'd let touch it, not a single unknown. The feds didn't say it aloud, not yet, but a new possibility had crept into the room. What if Charles Lord was a kidnapper? Or worse, what if the kidnapping never happened at all? The weeks ticked by, and Charles's behavior only deepened cracks. He started stopping by the sheriff's office, constantly, asking questions, offering suggestions, inserting himself into the case like a man who couldn't help touching the puzzle. Then came another call. Charles again, claiming the kidnapper had reached out a second time. This time, he said, the man had included one of Doe's scarves in his mailbox. The scarf was real, but again, no usable prints, no DNA, and no footage. When the FBI reviewed the birdhouse cam, the one aimed directly at the mailbox, something strange happened. The footage was blank, right where the kidnapper should have appeared. It cut out. Once, maybe that's a glitch. Twice, that's sabotage. By now, the agents weren't just suspicious. They were certain. Charles Lord was playing them. Then came the breaking point. Alan Roberts walked into the FBI's Memphis office, pale and rattled. He said Charles had pulled him aside at the local community center the night before. A private conversation. In that dim, echoing hall, Charles had whispered a deal. He claimed he had underworld connections. Said he could get information about Doe's whereabouts. For a price. Cash under the table. No questions asked. And strangest of all, Alan said Charles had been carrying a gun. That's when it clicked. The letters, the calls, the scarves, the sabotage. It had all been a show, staged by a friend, close enough to the victim to avoid suspicion, close enough to the investigation to misdirect it. He'd been the only one to ever hear from Doe, the only one the kidnapper trusted. And now, he was fishing for a payout. That's not desperation. That's orchestration. And the FBI was done playing along. Now that the lights were turned on, the shadows around Charles Lord started to dance. He wasn't just suspicious anymore. He was central. The kind of central that didn't just insert himself into the investigation. He shaped it. The FBI agents knew it was time to move in, but carefully. The last thing they wanted was to spook a man already weaving fiction into reality, like a spider making his last web. They needed proof, not just paranoia. So they began building the case the right way. Step 1, surveillance. Real surveillance this time. Eyes on Charles. Tails on his car. Wires on his phones, professionally installed, locked down, and foolproof. Even if he coughed into the receiver, they'd hear it in Quantico. And the birdhouse camera? Replaced. Upgraded. Protected. The next move was Charles's, and he made it within days. Another phone call came in, and wouldn't you know it, the kidnapper had returned. More cryptic threats. More vague accusations against Alan. But this time, the feds were ready. The call was traced to a payphone only blocks away. Same pattern, same escape. But this time, something was different. Charles had predicted it, claimed it would happen, told agents to be ready. It was too precise, too clean. That's not how random criminals operate. But maybe, just maybe, it's exactly how a man with a guilty conscience tries to manufacture innocence. Then came the letter that broke everything open. Another ransom note, this time found inside Charles Lord's mailbox. But this one wasn't vague, it was sloppy. Misspelled words, ink smudges, and a time-stamped receipt for the exact brand of notepaper tucked into Lord's own desk drawer. When the FBI lab in Quantico ran chemical tests on the note, they found ink transfer consistent with Lord's own pens, the kind he used in church bookkeeping. And more importantly, this time the hidden camera caught everything. The footage showed Lord, alone, under the cover of early dusk, walking to his own mailbox, eyes darting to the tree line, slipping a folded piece of paper through the slot. The kidnapper's note. The trap had worked. Agents made their move the next morning. No sirens, no spotlight, just a quiet knock at Lord's front door and a badge in his face. They sat him down, calm as winter frost, and laid the evidence out on the table like a deck of marked cards. The fake letters, the stage calls, the ruined surveillance, and then the moment of silence. A beat, and then he cracked, not with tears, not with rage, just a flat, breathless confession. He made it all up, but there was more. Lord admitted he never spoke to a kidnapper, never received real letters, never took calls from Doe Roberts, because he knew Doe Roberts was never coming back. He claimed he wanted to help, to keep the town focused, to protect his friend, Alan. But the truth was clearer than ever. Charles Lord had been playing both sides, trying to frame Alan Roberts, while also posing as the only man who could save him. In a single move, he'd turned himself into the star witness, the go-between and the savior. But now, he was just a fraud in handcuffs. Still, one problem remained, the worst one. They had exposed the lies. They had caught the pretender. But the one thing they didn't have was Doe Roberts. Not alive, not buried, not anywhere. And that meant the case was far from over. Spring had rolled in over Shelby County, but nothing felt renewed. Not at the Roberts estate. Still quiet, still hollow. And not at FBI Memphis, where agents paced over case files like they were walking circles in purgatory. They had cracked the hoaxer. Charles Lord, the church treasurer turned false witness, was now under federal scrutiny. But even with his lies unraveling like cheap string, Doe Roberts was still gone. No body, no answers, just theories and silence for the Bureau. The hardest cases were the ones where the victim never came home and the killer never said a word. And that's exactly where this case stood, until the cameras once again told a different story. While reviewing hours of mailbox surveillance footage, captured weeks earlier, an agent spotted something odd. It wasn't Lord this time. It was another man. Familiar, slouched posture, hesitant, Alan Roberts. In the grainy frame, he's seen slipping something, a piece of paper, maybe, into Lord's mailbox and then walking away, fast. That wasn't just suspicious, it was explosive. The man who was once the grieving husband had now tampered with the mailbox of a known false witness. A mailbox under federal surveillance. Why? Was he trying to create evidence? Destroy it? Or had the pressure finally gotten to him? The FBI had to know. Agents brought him in again, quietly. No cuffs, no threat. Just a slow, tense sit down in a cold room with hot lights. They played the tape. Watched his face carefully. Every twitch, every swallow. Alan didn't deny it. He claimed he'd written a letter, a plea, he said, a desperate request for Lord to stop interfering. That's all. But they didn't believe him. Not anymore. Not after months of contradictory stories, evasive timelines, and a phantom buyer named Sam Wagner who still didn't exist. They were running out of patience and running out of time. So the FBI turned to the one tool more persuasive than a badge. Forensics. Quantico's lab specialists revisited everything. The scarf that turned up mysteriously. The ransom notes. The paper fibers. The carpet threads from Alan's truck. The soil samples from the barn. They even used new blood pattern analysis software, freshly integrated into the Bureau's digital toolkit, the kind used to detect microscopic residues long since wiped clean. Still, no blood, no fingerprints, no signs of struggle. It was like Doe Roberts had vanished without ever being touched. And that's what made this case so unnerving. In most murders, something gives. A scream, a smear, a mistake. But this wasn't most murders. This was surgical, controlled. If Doe was dead, she had died in absolute silence. And that made one man seem more capable than all the others. The one who knew her routines. The one who'd already rehearsed the story. The one who had 5 unaccounted hours in a wide, wooded estate where secrets could stay buried forever. Alan Roberts. But they still had no body. And in the eyes of the law, no body often means no case. Unless someone talked. Unless someone cracked. Unless a single shovel hit something solid in Tennessee dirt. By the time winter whispered its way back into Eads, Tennessee, the town had changed. The porch light stayed on later. The church bells felt quieter. And the name, Doe Roberts, no longer sparked hope, only murmurs. The FBI hadn't closed the case. But without a body, a confession, or a trace of physical evidence, they were stuck in a purgatory more frustrating than failure. Limbo. And then, a twist. It didn't come from a criminal. It came from Charles Lord again. Now under intense pressure and facing federal charges for obstruction, false reporting, and interfering with a federal kidnapping investigation, Lord broke. Fully this time. He admitted the entire scheme. The fake ransom notes, the fabricated calls, the planted scarf, all designed to frame Alan Roberts, whom he claimed had hurt Doe and needed to be punished. But here's where it got strange. He didn't say Alan killed her. Didn't even claim to know she was dead. No, Charles told the FBI something else entirely. That he believed Doe had left voluntarily, run off after fight, gone to teach Alan a lesson, and somehow never come back. But he couldn't prove it. Just a theory, a fantasy. The FBI knew better. They read between the lines. This wasn't a case of a woman running. It was a case of a woman erased. And Lord, desperate for purpose or revenge, decided to stage the rest, to turn tragedy into theater. But still, no one had confessed to killing Doe. And without a body, even Lord's interference couldn't hand the case to prosecutors tied to hard evidence. So the FBI pivoted. They went back to beginning. The missing hours, the inhaler left behind, the mail dropped mid-step. And in those details, a theory emerged. One that wouldn't hold in court, but might explain everything. That morning, Doe and Alan had argued. Something domestic, small, the kind of thing you forget in 10 years but fight over in 10 minutes. Maybe she walked outside to cool off. Maybe Alan followed her. Maybe words escalated into something more, something final. In a moment of rage or panic, maybe he struck her. Accident or not, the outcome was irreversible. And Alan, meticulous man that he was, had enough land and enough time to make sure no one ever found her. The theory fit, but it wasn't enough. And Alan Roberts? He never broke, never confessed. Not in interviews, not in court, not in death. He passed away years later, never charged, never cleared. And somewhere beneath Tennessee's soil or far beyond its borders, Doe Roberts was never seen again. In the end, it wasn't the lies that broke the case. It was the absence of truth. A husband who knew too much. A friend who said too much. And a woman whose silence became the loudest sound of all. This was a case of shadows, of secrets, of silence. And the FBI, though relentless, can't always bring home the missing. But they never stop listening. They never stop watching. And they never stop waiting for the truth to come up for air.